Okay, so in this lesson, we are going to talk about factoring. And I'm given this problem that says factor completely. And I want to think about this problem in the context of what I'm doing using the problem solving process. So the first thing I need to realize is the steps I'm going to have to go through to completely do my problem. My first step in my problem solving is understanding the problem. Then I need to devise a plan. I need to carry out the plan, and I need to look back at what my solution might be. Understand the problem. The first part of this is, what am I trying to find out or do? And it talks about factoring completely. And I need to realize that factoring means that I'm separating a polynomial back out into a product. And by that, I sort of remember that with product, I'm supposed to have two binomials being multiplied together. So now I feel like I understand the problem. After I understand the problem, I needed to devise a plan in order to solve my problem. Now, I need to think about the strategies I've learned that I could use. Some strategies I've learned are to start always by using the GCF, or the greatest common factor. So I'm going to always start by looking for greatest common factor. The second strategy that we talked about, I know, was difference of squares. And as I'm thinking about difference of squares, I'm thinking about the fact that the word difference is in difference of squares. And I need to think back to my original problem and try to remember, okay, is there any subtracting? Because I know that difference means subtract. And I think I'm okay. I've got some subtracting in my problem. But I also remember that difference of squares was something that only had two terms with it. Well, my original problem was a trinomial. So I don't think I'm going to use difference of squares for this problem. Something else that we've talked about is factoring a trinomial. Something that has three terms, okay? And we have two different strategies for when we factor trinomials. We have one where a equals 1 and one where a is bigger than 1. And in this case, I think I'm in the one where a is bigger than 1. But before I make a decision on what plan I'm going to use, I think I also need to look at greatest common factor and one of these trinomials. Now that I've devised a plan, I know I'm going to use greatest common factor, and I know that I have some value of a. I need to go to step 3 in my problem solving, which is to carry out the plan. And the important part here is that I need to keep an accurate record of my work, which means that I need to show all of my steps as I am solving this problem. I want to go back and make sure that I've written it down correctly. So 4b squared minus 4b minus 8. And I want to make sure I get the problem written down correctly. So 4v squared minus 4v minus 8. I'm keeping an accurate record of my problem by writing down the original problem. And then if I remember back to what I was going to do before, the first thing I said I was going to start with was to start by factoring out the greatest common factor. So I'm going to look, and I'm going to see that the greatest common factor here is 4. Now, how did I come up with 4? All of those numbers are divisible by 4. There's not another number that would be divisible by all of those. I could use 2, but again, we need to remember we want the greatest common factor. So I'm going to factor out a 4 from my problem. When I do that, I know that I need to multiply whatever I have inside the parentheses by 4 to get my original polynomial. So I would need 4 squared minus 4v. And I have a 4 out front, so I would just have v, and then minus 2. Because 2 times 4 gives me my minus 8 in my original problem. If I was worried that I hadn't done this step correctly, I could go back at this point and check myself by distributing that 4 to every part of my parentheses. But I think I'm okay at this point. So I'm going to go on. Now I need to go back to my plan that I made. And I know that I have a trinomial, except now that I've factored out a GCF, which I know is my first step, I have something where a equals 1. So instead of using my other strategy, I'm going to use the strategy we learned where a equals 1. And I know that strategy involves the x method, where I need factors of my c value that will add to get my b value. The important thing I need to remember is that even though right now I have nothing written in front of my v, there is a 1 there. So I'm looking for factors of negative 2, or two numbers that multiply together to give me negative 2, that are going to add to get negative 1. Well, I only have really one choice for 2, for multiplying two numbers, and I know that is 2 and 1 are the only factors of 2. But I need to figure out which one will give me a negative 2 and a negative 1. And I know that since this number is a negative, only one of my factors can be a negative. Because if I multiply a negative times a negative, then I'm going to end up with a positive. So I could use guess and check, another strategy, to say negative 2 plus 1, or positive 2 plus a negative 1. And I know that my desired result is a negative 1. Well, negative 2 plus 1 is negative 1. 2 plus negative 1 is a positive 1. So I know that for my factor, I need my negative 2 instead of a negative 1. So I also know I need to include the 4 out front. I know my final factoring is going to be x is going to be v. I need to make sure I'm paying attention to the variable given in the problem. I know my final factorization is going to be v minus 2 times v plus 1. Now, I have done step 3 in the problem solving, which is to carry out the plan and keep an accurate record of your work. If someone were to go back and look at my work, they could follow my thinking the entire way through my process. But I have one last step that I need to take, and that is looking back. Step 4. Is my answer reasonable? Did I come up with something that was reasonable? And we came up with 4 times v minus 2 times v plus 1. I need to know, is that reasonable? From looking at it in this form, I can't tell if it's reasonable. But I know that we learned FOIL method in order to figure out what two binomials multiplied together equal. So I'm going to use FOIL to see if my answer is correct or reasonable. So I'm going to take v times v and get v squared. I'm going to leave the 4 out front for now. Then I'm going to take the outers, which is plus v, inners, which is minus 2v, and last, which is a minus 2 times a positive 1. So I've got minus 2. The last step I'm going to take is to multiply all of that by 4. But I know that inside parentheses I can simplify. So before I multiply everything by 4, I am going to simplify what I have in the parentheses by combining my middle two like terms. The last step I'm going to take is I need to distribute my 4 to every part of my parentheses. I got 4v squared minus 4v minus 8. If I were to check back my original problem, I would see that I ended up with exactly what I started with. So I would know that yes, my answer is reasonable because they wanted me to factor it out completely. I have 2 binomials being multiplied together, and I know that my binomials, when multiplied out, give me my original polynomial. I followed all 4 steps in the problem solving method, and I know that I have understood the problem, devised a plan, carried out that plan, and looked back and determined if my answer was reasonable.